Welcome to part 3 of our audio to MIDI tutorial, which should be the final part. We're now going to go through and show how we route our MIDI through to our gates, which we can then use to accurately trigger samples as well as gate our original source tracks, which will, as you will hear at the end, I'll do an A/B where you can hear the tracks being cleaned up quite a lot, and you'll hear the difference as well without the samples being involved. So let's get to it. So now we're going to route our MIDI out to our gates. The plugin we're going to use will be FabFilter's Pro G plugin, as it has an external sidechain that we're going to use to feed MIDI into. So if we go to our kick mic track, let's do this in the mixer window. So kick mic, inserts, and we want FabFilter Pro G. Tell you what, let's use the VST2 version. So let's go for this one here. I also want to put that on the snare mic track, and on the toms we are going to use the actual source tracks, and we're going to put a mono version of Pro G on those. And then if we come back to our MIDI, double click on that, just do that. So our kick needs to go out to, oh yeah, we need to, so yeah, no, let's do it from here. Let's do this first. So our kick MIDI needs to go out to FabFilter kick, snare out to FabFilter snare, T1 out to FabFilter T1, and the same for T2. Next we need to solo defeat our drum MIDI track. So if we come to our mixer here, hold down Alt, solo defeat, we should now find our gates that we've created on our tracks are now receiving that MIDI information, and when we hear those tracks being gated, if we go to our kick sample track, actually I'll just do the whole yeah, we'll just have the no, here we want kick mic track. Just go to our beginning of our track, press play there, and you can hear that being gated. If I come to the, we see up here to have our snare playing as well. Oh yeah, because we have our original tracks playing, so we don't want those anymore. Yeah, so if we go into the plugin here, we can hear that being gated. If I just bypass it for a moment, you can hear it not gated. And now it's being gated, so I'm just going to take the time just to apply some settings here. I have a ballpark figure for some of them in these tracks, so I'm just going to try and match those up for the moment. So I just want just needs to be 1 millisecond, and we want 5 there, that's fine. 100 here. I'll explain this range knob in a moment. Just want to get these settings ballparked. Threshold up high. Ratio 10:1. we can hear that being gated nicely. Yeah, just A and B and back and forth there. I was just worried there for a moment. We were losing some volume, but you can quite clearly hear that the volume is equally matched, even when the bypass is enabled. So hear the kick there, and with gating. I was trying to explain about this range knob. This is to control the noise floor of what's being gated. So if I bring this back, you can hear our bleed coming back. And if I bring it back, you can hear that being gated quite nicely with the MIDI information that we created earlier to accurately control this gate. So I'm just going to do the same with the snare. Still got our loop going. Might just make that a smaller section, just to make this thing easier. So you can hear that being gated already. Again, I'm just going to ballpark these figures. These usually work for me. So just going to go one on there. That's about halfway. Just going to bring my hold up. Again, and put my range up. Put my threshold up. And I think I'm losing some volume there. So I'm going to bring my ratio down so it's not being squashed as much. And here in bypass again, no bleed, and being gated. And being gated quite nicely. So just want to hear kick and snare together. So I'm going to do the same now for the toms, so I'm just going to solo out the toms, solo defeat that again, just bring up the toms. I've already dialed in some ballpark, and you've got to make sure external is selected on the sidechain. Not sure if I mentioned that earlier. And let's have a listen. So I just want to hear that first tom. Sounds like it's being gated nicely. For some reason can't hear it. I think, yeah, our tom track's not soloed. There we go. Can hear that being nicely gated. And we'll just bring in our second tom track. Just check that's on external. Just want to hear that second one. And make sure toms are soloed. Now. Hear them both together. And we can hear that with the kicks. Just going to bring it back in our kick, our snare and our toms being nicely gated. If I just bypass the plugins here, you can hear all that MIDI going back in. Nicely gated, and I'll bring in the overheads as well. I think I'll bring in those rooms as well. And again, I'll A and B that so you can hear that how much they've cleaned up with the plugins. So bypass. Considerably more bleed. And then engaged, you can hear them being cleaned up. I'll A and B that a few more times. So off. And I'll turn it back on. So this is the final segment now, where we will be using the same MIDI for triggering the samples. So let's create the tracks for that. So I'm going to create and I'll do them below the drum MIDI here. I need 2 stereo tracks. I'm only going to be triggering samples for the snare and the kick. You can do the toms as well, but I'm not a massive fan of triggering tom samples over the top of real toms. I prefer to have natural sounding toms because I think they sound a little bit more fake when you're using a sample. If you're going to do that, it's probably just best to use a sample alone and not the real track along with it, because it'll just sound really weird. So let's just create those 2 tracks. So group 2 of them, add. Oh, I already created them, so let's get rid of 2 of those, remove. Let's just get rid of that, let's move these up. And let's call that kick sample, snare sample. I want to route that to the groups that we created earlier, so that's kick sample, and that goes to snare sample. Each of these need an instance of trigger, so let's come back here and find them. Again, let's open up trigger. And we need 2, I'll just drag that second instance there. So these need to be set up now to receive MIDI in. So if we go to the settings, we no longer want MIDI. Oh yeah, so it's already set up, so as default. So C1, that's correct for our kick track, as you can see, C1, and I need D1 for the snare. So if I come back here, settings, MIDI in, D1. So I'm going to pick a sample for that. That's going to be in our browser. Let's go to the kick series, kick A, and I want this kick here. Just audition that. Just make sure we can hear them. It's a nice hard sounding kick, nice bit of click to it. And same for snare. I want to find a nice snare. So process snare, playground snare, and yeah, this one here, splatty snare. So we can also now use our same drum MIDI track to send MIDI to those instances of trigger without having to create another MIDI track. So again, double click into your drum MIDI, and we want to go to our MIDI sends and turn that on. And this is where you can select where you want to send MIDI as well. So these would be the tracks we've just created, so that would be MIDI for the kick, and we also want to send MIDI to the snare. So I'm just going to solo out the samples and just see if we've got any samples going in now. We should do. Yep. The velocity's a little wacky at the moment, but we are going to sort those out. So next we want to address the velocity inconsistencies. We have captured the drummer's playing and his natural velocities, but when this is printed as MIDI there will be inconsistencies, obviously dependent on the drummer of course. The performance has a wide range of velocities per instrument, and we want to level out and adjust the velocity so it sounds more consistent for the purpose of reinforcing the drum performance. I prefer to do this in Trigger and not by editing the MIDI in the MIDI window in Cubase itself. If you have a look at the MIDI here, you can see how inconsistent. We'll have harder hits, softer hits, but I prefer not to edit this. Same here again. I prefer to do this inside Trigger itself, which what we will do next. So next we are going to look at leveling out the velocities within the Trigger plugin. So let's bring up the trigger for our kick sample and go to our curves. I'm not going to trigger a 127 sample. So basically at the moment what was being triggered are all velocities from the range of 0, which is the softest, to the hardest at 127. You don't want to use 127, it's just going to look, well, it's just going to sound absolutely ridiculous of a drummer hitting drums at the hardest way possible during a performance. So I'm going to back that down to 100, and we'll have a range from 90. Now if you have ghost notes you might have to play with this. You might have to have a separate track for ghost notes, that's possible. It's a bit more work, but it's worth doing. And we're also going to play with our dynamics here, so I'm just going to bring that down to 65. And velocities I'm going to take up to 90. Let's have a listen to our kick track. So that's sounding a lot more consistent compared to what we had before. And let's do the same for our snare track. Go to these curves. Again, let's bring our range 90 to 100. It's a good ballpark figure. You can always mess with those later. Obviously depending on the genre and how you want it to sound. So yeah, we'll get a nice sample response there. Zoom them both together, and we can now let's just to tidy up. I need to get rid of these group tracks from earlier where we were using to capture the actual MIDI performance. We don't need these anymore. If you do need to go back and re-record out your MIDI, if it's a bit of a mess, then you might want to keep these, maybe hide them in the background and just bring them back whenever you need them. But at the moment, I'm not going to need these anymore, so I'm just going to remove those. So if I bring everything back in, now you can hear the this is the gates and the samples along with the full drum kit sounding a lot fuller. Again, I'm going to A/B the difference. So this is with nothing. And let's bring everything back in, the gates and the samples. Sounding quite plain, no punch. Remember, there's no EQ or compression going on here as well. So far, this is just cleaning up the bleed and just adding some samples that we can use now to mix in with our drum kits. So that, this is putting us in a good spot for mixing the drums. Again, I'll bring them back in. Next we will look at phase aligning those samples, so we're just making sure everything is in phase and keeping our low end intact. So we've reached the very last part now of our audio to MIDI tutorial. This is where I'm going to phase align the samples using auto align. This is our very last thing to do. It's an important thing to do at this point is to save our session, close Cubase and reopen the session. This is to make sure that our delay compensation is working properly and that the saved session opens correctly each time. It's very important to do this, so I'm going to save and close down Cubase, and I'll be back when it's reopened. Okay, so we are back and we're going to use auto align now to phase align these samples to the natural drum mics. So let's load an instance of auto align on the mic track and the sample track. We'll set the mic instance to send one and the sample instance to receive one, and get those in phase, and we'll do the same for the snare. So let's go to our mic track. So let's just come back into our mixer. So we have our mic track and our sample track. So let's go to auto align, set that to send one, just copy that over, and I'll go to receive one, and we'll just let that roll around. Set our noise floor. Let it roll. Just going to do that again. It doesn't appear to have picked it up. There we go. Need to do it on the second instance. To our kick. This might be subtle, but it's worth doing. Yeah, you can definitely hear more low end when the plugins engage. So that's getting those in phase quite nicely. So I'm just going to do the same for our snare. Might be missing a trigger there I can hear, but we can always deal with that afterwards. So this will be send to, and this will be receive to. And let's set that root. Just set our noise floor. Let that work. Phase line, no snares. So again, I'm hearing more low end when they're phase aligned. So I'm just going to bring everything back in, and we'll have a listen through. We might hear some missed triggers along the way. That would be where you would need to go back and just double check. It appears to be on the snare track. We might be missing a couple, but they should be easy to add in using that edit in place feature. So let's have a listen back to our whole track. So I'm just going to stick that loop, go back to the beginning, and we'll press play and we'll have a listen through. So we might have got lucky with our trigger in there. It didn't sound like anything was missing at all. So that concludes the end of our tutorial here of showing how you can get MIDI from a real recorded drum kit. Hope this has been helpful. If you have any questions, obviously leave a comment in the comment section. I'll try and answer it the best I can. But again, thanks for watching. Bye.